Um, Glad to be back at Jackson, do a little training here. We hadn't really done a whole lot of trainings out of here this year. It's been kind of light, you know. We've been on lockdown like everybody else. Actually, my kids just got locked down. Their school just told them they had to come back home. So as of Monday, this Monday, we no longer going to school. So I got that to look forward to. I just sent them back, and now I gotta bring them back home. So I'm living in this pandemic the same as everybody else online, same as everybody else in Indiana. And I'm shutting my house up too, you know. So I have to live there. I have to breathe the air in my house. And how am I going to do this in today's environment? You know, what should I be concerned about? So if I'm thinking this, trust me, every homeowner you deal with right now is thinking the same thing. They want to know how can they keep their house cleaner than before, you know. And I was a service tech a long time, and I can remember trying to tell homeowners, hey, you need a UV light, hey, you need a filter, hey, you need this, you need that. And I'm like, I don't need any of that. Just fix my stuff and leave, right? Not all of them, but I think you know my point. Today, the feedback I'm getting from the field all year has been our homeowners are demanding more information on indoor air quality equipment. You know, they're doing their research. They're seeing all these articles that says, I need a filter, or I need some sort of UV to keep my coil area clean and all this stuff. And they're educating themselves. So my advice to you as a heating and air contractor is to make sure that you have everything you need as far as knowledge, as far as installation practices, and as far as sales tips with these products to be able to present to a homeowner that, hey, you know, your company does these things, and we'll be glad to add them to your new install, or while we're here doing a clean and check, we can add them, right? So we're just going to go through the highlight of each of the Resideo Honeywell Home IAQ products that enhance your systems, and then I'm going to show you a little tool at the end of this presentation that you can get that helps you validate this your findings to a homeowner. So let's get started here, and we're going to start with what's going on in a house, right? So if you look at your house, you know, especially I just moved into a house at the end of July, excuse me. So I've been there about 3 months now, and brand new house, right? So it was a Lennar built house, so it's very, very tight. It passes all the Energy Star requirements that new construction has, but it's pretty much this here, right? So brand new house, the energy savings are great, but unless you got some type of ventilation going on in there, you might as well wrap your house in plastic and try to make it breathe. It ain't gonna breathe, right? If you don't have low off-gassing materials when that house is built, then everything that house is built out of has nowhere to go as it off-gasses into the structure. So off-gassing is, you know, moisture. You cook, you take showers, that moisture gets in the air, that's an off-gas. What your house is actually built out of. If you take the particle board plywood that's in these houses, that's formaldehyde glues pressing a bunch of sawdust and wood chips together. That stuff has to go somewhere. The off-gassing from it requires ventilation. So if you had inadequate ventilation in a house, it's just going to build up in there, and then it goes into your lungs, right? So people, you know, you got a bunch of people in the house, dogs, cats, they exhale, and when they exhale, that's carbon dioxide. So those things can build up and displace oxygen in a home. Formaldehydes from different furnitures, cleaning products, and, you know, the buzzwords, volatile organic compounds. Well, most homeowners, that's a lot of words, right? And sometimes the contractors, that's a lot of words. We try to break that down more of the chemicals that may be floating around in your air. That's what those VOCs are, okay? And then combustion gases. If you got inadequate flue piping, or if your ventilation is such so where your house, you know, pulls air out but keeps your house sucked in and you have nowhere to go, you got to open up a window to get that to pop back into shape. Well, the same thing can happen in here. If you pull a negative in that house, your chimneys will reverse. And if your chimneys reverse, you can pull the flue gases back into that structure. So all these things have to be looked at. Building science is real, and your HVAC system with its fan, that central fan in there, is going to push air through that filter. It's going to pull particulates out of it. It's going to push air across this PCO and this coil UV, and it's going to take bad stuff out of the air and keep surfaces clean. The humidity can't push itself around the house. It needs that furnace fan to do it. Same thing with dehumidifiers, right? And ventilators. The HVAC system is step one of indoor air quality, right? And if you're changing out a piece of equipment today, you really need to tell that homeowner that you should go invest in that variable speed piece of gear. A couple things variable speed does. One, it pulls more moisture out than a standard system. And two, you can afford to run the fan 24 hours a day as long as you have that furnace, because it uses very little amps. And when it is finished with its call for cooling or its call for heating, slows that fan speed down. It makes that filter super efficient, makes that UV light work better, makes everything work better. So foundation for indoor air quality is a good fan motor if you can do it, okay? Otherwise, if you have a standard fan motor, because it's on a service call you ran, the system's 2 years old, they're not pulling that furnace out. They're just going to have to run that fan more. There's a golden rule of IAQ. If your fan's not running, your filter's not working. So you have to move air through these things to get the results you're looking for when you're trying to bring the house back into control, where it's out of control with IAQ disasters, okay? So this chart here, you have to learn it, okay? This is the Ashrae health and humidity chart. And in the middle, if you can keep your house between 40 and 60%, rock on, right? That's the kill zone. That's when you feel good, right? So you guys can tell I've had a few pizzas, right? So, I can sweat peeling an orange. It is terrible. I mean, if my house is high humidity, it's not good. And I can tell it, right? So if it creeps up in here in the summertime, I'll be cranking the AC unit down, and it says it's 68 degrees in there. But if my humidity's 65, it doesn't feel that. It feels like a cave. It's cold and clammy, and not exactly ideal conditions. So we want to pull that and dehumidify that house to get that system back into its optimal zone there. And the same thing in the winter. We're heading into winter here. So last week, we live in central Indiana. It was 75 degrees, last week. And, actually part of this week too. And we had a cold front move in last night. So guess what? Now the houses are going to be battened down. And we got to start looking at the humidifying season, because now as we introduce heat in here, it starts drying the structure out. All the moisture starts getting pulled out of the wood and everything else. So if I get down here in the 20s, it's bad. My nose starts bleeding, my floors start pulling apart. All the crazy stuff starts happening on the other side of that optimum zone, okay? So that's when we're going to add a humidifier to the scene to bring it back up in the winter. So I'm taking care of it with a dehumidifier or a good variable speed, or maybe a standalone dehumidifier. And in the summertime and in the wintertime, I may have to add humidity to bring it back up there, okay? And if you do those things, if you keep it in the zone right here, you're going to have real good indoor air quality year-round in that structure, right? So we make one of everything you need to give you good indoor air quality in that house, okay? So we're going to highlight just a little bit of each one, so just enough to be dangerous there, right? Let's start with what is up here. The three things that a homeowner is concerned about the most: dust, airborne allergens, and then viruses and bacteria, especially today, right? So let's start with dust. How do I get it out of the house? Well, you want to pick a good filter system, right? And a good 4-inch filter beats the pants off a 1-inch filter all day long, right? I mean, we sell a lot of 1-inch filters, but if you can get the homeowner to upgrade to a Merv 11 or a Merv 13, or you have these hybrid half paper filter, half electronic filter systems. We make an electronic air cleaner. And we made them for years, you know, and everybody always says, yeah, man, you guys been making those for 50, I think they're 50 years old, right? But this isn't the same one we made in 1969, right? This is the one we made a couple of months ago. And what makes these things awesome is that I've got electronic cell, and everybody thinks, hey man, I'm just going to take some coil cleaner and I'm going to, you know, I'm just going to spray some coil cleaner on it when it gets dirty. Well, that's how you ruin them, right? These things are aluminum and they got a coating on them. And the only thing you have to do once a year, okay, is take these things and put them down in some really, really hot water, and then come back and rinse them off. That's it. You don't want to put them back in wet, right? So once a year is all you need to do to clean that cell. You can see through the thing. I mean, it's very, very low pressure drop. These cells, what it does is it activates the air particles through there, and it magnetizes them, and they stick to the cells, and it really works well. So if you got candles burning in your house, and you know, a lot of soot from an old coal stove or whatever you had, that thing works really well. So the thing that people overlook is I got this little pre-filter here. Well, that's going to capture the dust bunnies. That thing has to be vacuumed off once a month, okay? And that's all you got to do to that. The other thing is, because these things really take a lot of carbon out of the air, you have to have these post filters. These have to be changed every 6 months. You can't wash that. It comes in a sealed bag, and it's pre-charged. So as this thing is ripping all the carbon out of the air and all the black soot, the dust that makes it through is going to be white dust, and it'll settle on things, and you'll think, wow, I never noticed that dust before. Well, you never noticed it because it had carbon in it, and it blended in with your black furniture a little better. So this will capture that white dust that's coming out the other end and stop that phenomenon of, hey, this electronic air cleaner is actually, I've actually got dust. So it's needed, and you got to change them every 6 months. So every time you go out to the customer's house, either leave them 2 post filter packets at when you do your cleaning of it, and then once a year you take that out and you clean it. Now you can put these electronic cells in the you could put them in your dishwasher, but you got to be careful, and it's got to be either a stainless steel dishwasher or a dishwasher that's not plastic, because if it's white plastic, all that carbon and stuff that was in there gets released in there. It'll actually soak into that plastic, and then you'll have a gray tub, and you won't want that. So for your homeowners that are okay with cleaning those things, they work really well. And if you had the closest we can Merv test those, they go to about 16 Merv. You can't really put a Merv rating on a filter that doesn't have a final load up. The electronic air cleaner never has a final load up because it's actually very non-restrictive as far as filters go. Just want to keep the cell clean once a year and stay on top of your every month on your pre-filter and every 6 months on your post-filter, and that thing rocks, right? Now, if you add that F300 electronic air cleaner with our UV light, we'll give you a 12-year clean coil guarantee to your end user. So if you ever have to clean that coil, if you put those 2 in, we'll pay for it. So it's a kind of a nice deal. But if electronics not your game, you can choose one of the F100 or F200 cabinets to put in. Nothing really different about these F100 and F200 cabinets, but how they come with a filter in them is what's different. The F100 has a Merv 11, the F200 has a Merv 13, and I'll show you what the differences are on the Merv 13s. So we all should know what to look for when we're in a house for filtration, right? You just want to look around and ask that homeowner, hey, it's I guess you got to be careful how you say that your house is kind of dirty, right? This is the dustiest house I've ever been in. They usually will tell you, right? But everybody needs a filter in the long run. So let's look at what makes a filter work. So the first thing is efficiency, right? How much are we capturing with the filter? The second thing is pressure drop, right? A paper filter will load up eventually, right? And as it gets to 0.5 static pressure across the thing, it's got to come out of there. That's when you start creating drag for that indoor fan motor. So you want to make sure that you keep these filters changed pretty regular. On a 4-inch filter, family of 4, you could probably run that thing for 6 months before you have to change it again. And if you have some way to put a pressure sensor across the filter, and you can check it that way too. But usually every 6 months you're changing that 4-inch. Then we want to know how much will it hold. What's the filter life? And that's where your Merv rating comes in. The higher the Merv rating, the more particulates you're going to strain out of that structure. So what does Merv mean? Well, it's minimum efficiency reporting value, right? A lot of these little acronyms you need to learn because the homeowners go to Google and they learn them, right? So last thing you want to do is, hey, what's the Merv rating of the filter you got? Don't be that guy, right? Just know what this stuff means. It's our jobs. And, you know, so the Merv rating is 1/3, and that's the part that we're looking at how much it will capture. So we got this little chart here, and every one of you can have access to this chart. All these slides are being prevented, or you got them to where they can get them. So they're all accessible to you. And this is what Merv rating means. So if I go to Home Depot or somewhere and get a little 4-inch fiberglass filter, well, that's about a Merv 4. And it only gets 20% of the dust bunnies. Everything else flows through it, right? I mean, you can run table salt through it. It's really not getting anything. But if you move up here to the professional, you know, most contractors are at least at a minimum carrying a Merv 11. You're going to get 65 to 80% of group 2 particles, which is mold spores, dander, you know, a lot of good fine dust in the home. You'll get 65 to 80% of that, and all the big stuff it's going to get 85% of. If you move to a Merv 13, you're going to get 75% of group 1 particles, and group 1 is bacteria, some tobacco smoke, some really bad stuff, right? So a Merv 13 paper filter starts getting really, really good at filtering out the house. It gets 90% of group 2 and 90% of group 3, just going from a Merv 11 to a Merv 13 for that homeowner. And if you get into the Carrier Infinities and a couple other brands out there that have half paper, half electronic, the Honeywell electronic, you're in the Merv 15 to 16 range with those devices, and you're really, really doing some filtering there. You got a question?
Yeah, Brett is asking the question of the hour, and you might be getting into this later, Gary,
Yep.
but he's asking about combining the F300 with UV. Do we have any research as far as what it does with the coronavirus?
So we do not suggest that you go into somebody's house and say, I'm with so-and-so heating and air, and I'm here to protect you against the coronavirus. That is the worst thing you could ever do, okay? So we don't make COVID statements, and I know there's some brands out there that do, and let me tell you why we don't. Because this UV light is capable of killing viruses at the cellular level. I already know it will tear apart a virus, okay? But it's not gonna, you know, where this thing is located is at your coil where things are growing on it, and that's gonna keep all that clean, okay? In the odd event that I sneeze, I've got coronavirus in my house and I sneeze and it makes it to my coil, you know, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. So I would love to sit here and say, here, man, take this piece of paper and, you know, go scare your homeowner with coronavirus, you know, or not scare them. But we just don't do that. And we don't do that for a lot of legal reasons. And as somebody that's been in this industry a long time, I would not recommend you do that, even if you have a piece of paper that says they tested it. Because when they test these things and they say we tested They put it in a petri dish, they put a thing over it. It's in a really controlled environment. It's not in a house where kids are running around doing this and that. So as far as CDC guidelines on how to keep your surfaces clean, follow those. As far as what heating and air has to do, I want to filter my structure. I want to ventilate my structure. I want a good UV light that's actually killing things at the surface of my coil. And in the odd event it's got a PCO on it that actually does some VOC removal, I'm going to do that as well. So I hope that answers it. I'm not, and I hope you don't think I'm being weird about it. It's just that we just don't feel that it's going to help you in the long run by getting into that conversation, because none of you are scientists, none of you. So if I hand you a piece of paper from a scientist that says here, this scientist says this, it's not going to help you. Just focus on what you can do in regards to the heating and air system to make it as maximum cleanliness as possible as being delivered by that furnace or air handler from the stuff you put in, right? Because hey, let's say I had a COVID statement with this UV light that says it kills coronavirus. You go put it in somebody's house. They don't have a variable speed fan and the fan's not running. Well, they die from coronavirus. They gonna come and sue you? I mean, the fan wasn't running. Did you tell them that when the fan doesn't run, these lights aren't doing anything? That's why we don't get into that mess, okay? Focus on what you can do to keep the system clean as possible, and they're gonna do what they have to do with social distancing, washing their countertops and all that stuff. So that's a long answer, but I hope it's a good one, okay? Now let's get into what these micron sizes do. So that's going to capture bacteria, dust mites, molds, pet danders, all this stuff. We want to trap it in that filter, right? And that UV light, any of that mess that got through there that hits that UV or gets into that coil, ain't gonna make it out of that coil, okay? It's gonna, and you got to keep that bulb change once a year on that UV to make sure you're actually doing that, okay? Another question.
Yeah, real quick. Another question from Nathan. He asks, so how close to any UV sensitive surface can you have the light located, like especially proximity to the filter?
So a UV light that's worth its salt will eat through a filter. They do not need to see a filter at all. It's a pretty neat thing to see if you ever do it and want to test it. It'll burn a hole right through it like a laser beam. So you do not want the UV looking at the filter. It needs to be over the coil, taking care of it. If you got a downflow or an air handler, something, you got to move that filter somewhere else, okay? As far as, while we're talking about that, as far as my humidifiers or any of my other products that I sell, we add a product called carbon black to the plastic, and that keeps it from getting brittle from UV radiation. It's resistant to UV. So very good question, and I get that I ask a lot. So pick a good filter system and pick our UV, and that's a 1-2 punch right there for a homeowner, okay? But if the fan ain't running, Tyler, what's the filter doing?
Nothing.
It's not doing anything, right? If the fan ain't running, what's my UV light doing? Well, mine will actually, my UV light stays on 24 hours a day to keep the coil from ever growing anything on it, okay? The PCO, which is the photocatalytic oxidizer that the UV light will activate, and as air gets pushed through it, it reduces chemicals that are in the air in a pretty significant amount, right? So I need airflow for those things to happen, okay? But you got airflow moving through those things, that's gonna help your homeowners out a lot, okay? We also have pop-up filters. There's some models out there that fit the 2200 and 2200 space cards. So if you have to get an upgrade kit or you're tired of combs and filters, you can just get a pop-up and take that case out of there, and it slides right into the 2200 or 2400 space, and they're Merv 11. So they're nice to have. And one filter of a normal filter, you can put like 5 of those boxes in there. All right, so we get past dust. Now we're going to get into airborne allergens and why we need and bacteria, and why we need a UV light, right? So UV will kill bacteria and molds, okay? And how it does it is it as that spectrum of UV light that we dial into this bulb, which is 254 nanometer of radiation, and a good UVC system is going to do that, right? It's going to give you enough of a lethal dose to where it's going to disrupt the DNA that those cells are made of, right? So that bulb, as it shines down on that coil, it's got some real intense radiation, and that's how nothing can live on it, right? So this will stay on 24 hours a day. Now, once a year, you'll take this bulb, and you notice I'm not using a glove because this is not a GE halogen light. Now, you don't want to like eat jelly donuts and handle it or anything, but generally you can just use your hand there and pop the new bulb in without breaking it. Pop the new bulb in, you're good to go. This will slip out of the housing. Now, the cool thing about this little light is we give you a little template, and you stick it on there, and you take your little black magic marker, cut those holes out, and then this goes right on the plenum. You only need like a 2-inch hole, and boom, your UV light's installed. It has magnets on it, and I'm not sure if I got anything metal. Let me see. This is metal. So if you had the back of the plenum and you couldn't get, a package unit or something, because it's got that metal front, you can mount it internally and without having to build some field expedient kit. So very, very cool little deal. This model does not have the PCO in the box, but we make a model that's just the UV light by itself, or you can buy the model that's a UV light with the PCO, and I'll go over what that PCO is, because that's a real nice enhancement to the bulb. If you've been drinking water from the tap all these years, there's a big UV light at the water plant that takes and zaps all the bacteria and stuff and viruses that are in that water. That's been going on since the early 1900s, like 1903. So it's nothing new. It's how hospitals have been keeping you clean when they open up. You go have surgery and all this other stuff. So closed environments is big deal for UV. So they do a really good job. Especially now you're starting to see restaurants put them in as they're getting their pre-COVID stuff happening. It's just like putting up the plexiglass. They just want anything that moves through those systems. They want a good environment to start treating the air going through there. Yes.
Yeah, we have a question from Richard. He asked, what about UV and like the wiring for installation? Does it also have problems with the old wiring in the system?
So the UV where this mounts is up in the plenum, which is like if I got a furnace, I got a coil, and then I got a plenum. There's no wiring in the plenum. So if you're up underneath on an air handler and you're having to go on the bottom there's still a coil there. You may see a wire or two, but most manufacturers build their equipment these days knowing there may be a UV light added somewhere. So it's rare that you find a brand that, even with the plastic drain pans, they're putting this stuff in the carbon black, same as we do, to keep that stuff from happening. So don't be afraid. And if you think that the equipment that you put in is, that you just don't know, call your equipment manufacturer and ask them, and they'll say yes or no. They're probably going to say yeah because we have a model. Most brands have their own UV line anyway. Yep.
With an A coil, where would you recommend the install for?
At the top of it. So the question was, where do I put it on an A coil? So the A coil is like this, and I know you got the bottom part, but that's why I want that filter on that bottom part, right? Because that's the hardest part to clean. If you really wanted to clean the bottom of an A coil properly, you're bringing the charge back into the compressor, cutting the refrigerant lines, taking the thing outside and pressure washing it. Nobody's going to do that. So once you get that thing good and clean on the bottom once, put a 4-inch filter in front of it. Then you put that UV light over the top, and it's going to shine through those clean fins, right? Those fins shouldn't be dirty. Those fins should be able to let the air go through, right? And if it's clogged up, well, the air ain't going through it. You're not humidifying the house properly because you're not air conditioning properly. The amp draw went up, so your 14 SEER is now probably an 11 SEER because you got a folded up army blanket on the back of that coil. So that's what the filter's for, okay? Once you get a good 4-inch filter in there and that UV light on the top side, that's why we give you a 12-year clean coil guarantee to keep that stuff from happening, okay? So here's a clean HVAC coil. Here's a dirty one, right? The homeowner smells now because, you know, that dirty HVAC coil with bacteria all over it, especially on heat pumps. You switch from heat to cool or whatever, and now you smell dirty sock smell, and that's called dirty sock syndrome out of a heat pump. You put my UV light on that coil, that goes away. You will not have dirty sock, okay? Also, just like I touched on a minute ago, my system efficiency goes down when I can't push the air through a nice clean coil. They make these things, if you want that coil to look like the day it came out of the day you installed it, put a good 4-inch filter and a good UV light on, and it'll look that way forever, okay? Now, here's the PCO bar that goes across the top, okay? Now, you can buy that all together, or you can buy it and buy the UV light today and add that later. But when you add that, it opens up a whole nother dynamic of air purification that we're doing. Not only are we keeping molds and bacteria and viruses from growing on that coil, now if I've got formaldehyde gases or pine sol vapors or, you know, carbon dioxide or whatever I got going on in my house, this UV light, the intensity of it acts as a catalyst for the titanium dioxide powder that's on that charcoal PCO. And it pretty much makes it sticky, right? So when you look at that honeycomb, whenever you, if you was to lay all these, the linear feet that we have in all those honeycombs, it's like 7 football fields of space, right? Believe it or not. And we're pushing very small particles in there, and that PCO actually will hold it long enough for the intensity of that UV light to destroy it and actually rearrange its chemical makeup. So if you drive a car, every one of you have a catalytic converter on your car. Well, the catalytic converter takes carbon monoxide gases from the engine and turns it into carbon dioxide and water vapor. And that, you ever notice there's water kind of, why is there water coming out of my tailpipe? Well, your catalytic converter's doing that. So this thing is kind of like a catalytic converter for your house. It's taking bad chemicals, rearranging them to good chemicals, and giving you a reduction in VOCs to do that, right? So this is a typical installation on a gas furnace with a coil above it. And I'm going to shine down over here. The UV light pointing that way is actually shining on that on those surfaces and drain pan to keep them clean. The other end of the UV light is going in here to interact with that PCO. So let's look at how it works. So here's the UV light hitting the PCO. My oxidizing agents are released. It surrounds the germ cell that's caught inside that honeycomb, and then it's released back out into the air as carbon dioxide and water vapor, which is what we breathe out, right? So it takes bad stuff and turns it into not so bad stuff, okay? And it does a really good job of it. So here's the internal mount and the external mount. So like if I was on the outside and I had plenty of room, fine. If I had this plenum full of duct and I couldn't get to anything, well, I could remove a duct, put that against the back, maybe that plenum inside is against the back wall so there's room. I can just stick it on that metal. And I got a really long, nice quick connect cable in here so I can have that outside before I stick my face in that plenum. And you never want to look at that UV light with your naked eyes. It's not a good thing, right? It's bad. It will actually burn the retinas out of your eyes. So because it's not a light, it's not a black light and, hey man, come over and let's listen to my Zeppelin records. It's actually killing bacteria by rearranging it at a DNA level, right? So you don't want to mess around with it. All right, so let's go next. You want to replace that lamp once a year because it needs to keep the intensity of that UV light. So the UV light could keep the coil clean for about 3 years. But because I lose enough intensity in a year that will not activate the PCO, I want to change that bulb every year. The bulb replacement is not that expensive, okay? Get with your Jackson guys, they'll tell you how much they are, but they're not that expensive. Make sure that if you have one of these in your homeowner's house, that you have in their service ticket that we changed it last year and it's due for another year, another change. Yes?
I got an interesting question from
Sure.
Orville. He asks, will installing UV on a dirty existing coil clean it and keep it clean moving forward?
So it'll, anything that's, what he asked was, can I put this in on a dirty coil and it do all the work for me pretty much? No, you got to clean the coil, then it'll keep it from ever getting dirty again. If you got a good filter on this side, I won't have any more sludge in my drain pan. I won't have any more dirty sock going on, excuse me. But you know, you got to do your service work and then you add this. If you would have put this in when you installed it, you would have never had a dirty one, right? So, and it was properly maintained and all the stuff you got to do. But yeah, I wish, right? I wish we had that. I'd be selling more UVs than I ever sold in my life, right? But no, you got to clean them, and then add this in to keep them clean, right? It's like duct sealing, or it's like duct cleaners. If you ever have a duct cleaner to your house, you should never have to have them back because they should be sealing that duct and putting filters in to where it never got that way. But so that's kind of my point. Okay. All right. Now let's look at humidity. Okay. Got to keep humidity in check, especially right now because you know static builds up. You got wood that may be in there. You may have somebody that has grand piano or whatever. But the main thing is for to keep the moisture in the structure and to make sure that it's not pulling water out of you, because not only will it, you know, if your house is drying out, well, you're in the house, you're 70% water and 30% mass. Well, if your cuticles start drying out, you start noticing that you have dry skin, that's your house sucking the water out of your body. So we have to add that humidity in to keep healthy. Also to keep our building materials from drying out and, you know, and wearing out over time. But the other thing is, if you get dried out, then your nasal passages get dried out. Well, there goes your defenses from getting sick, right? So having proper humidity in your house keeps those things from happening, okay? And we got a couple ways to do it. We got evaporatives, whether it's a bypass or a powered, and we got a steam with a canister in it, and either one of those are going to deliver humidity. Why would I use one over the other? Well, if I've just got a hot furnace, 120 degree plenum and single stage, bypass will be just fine if my house is not that tight, right? So if my house is average to loose, as it gets colder outside, my furnace runs longer. Well, these evaporatives need the heat from the furnace. They steal the heat from the furnace, run it through a wet pad, and introduce the water into that dry air that way. The steam humidifier does not need the furnace to be on. It needs the fan to be on, but because it takes two electrodes and brings in some 220 or 110 voltage, no matter, you know, depends on which one you're doing. It's gonna just evaporate the water by completing the connection between the calcium and magnesium that's in the water, and that conducts the electricity, and it just flashes that into vapor, and it goes into your house as steam humidity, and it's pretty nice. So simple and easy. You know, hey, these things cover a lot of bases on the basic. But when you move up to the better of the bypasses, we've got a board in there that actually shuts the water down after the pad gets wet, and then it after it runs and dries the pad out, gets it wet again. So the action of that cuts about 30% of the water use from going down the drain. You're actually getting the same amount of humidity, but using a third less of the water. On the powered humidifiers, it cuts the water use in half. So we actually are super efficient on the water flow on those advanced bypass and powereds. The steam uses about a coffee cup full of water a day. You got any questions? Yep. So the steam humidifier, because it's evaporating pretty much on a 1-to-1 ratio, I may lose about a coffee cup's worth of water from just the adding some fresh water in and draining some of the hard water out of there. So let's look at these advanced. So these advanced, they got a couple different things on them that you might not have realized would have helped you out here. One of them is I can pull the pad out this side, or I can pull it out this side. We've also engineered it to come out of the top, right? So if it's in a closet and I can't get out of either side, I can come out of the front, which is kind of unusual, but it's really nice to have. Also, if my return duct is in the wrong direction, actually I'll show you that's on a slide after, but this is the board that's in here. This board has a way to, it's got a couple things. It's got a relay in it that allows you to cut the green wire between the zone panel and the furnace, so you're downstream. This thing can force the fan on with a call for humidity. So if I'm in a zone system, I want to use this type of humidifier because I can take the green wire between the furnace and the zone panel, route it through here, even though one of my zone thermostats may be reading the humidity. I would set it up as humidistat only, tell the humidifier that it's forcing the fan on, and I'm not shutting zones down, which is what happens when you do that. So that relay is already built in. I don't have to buy a relay kit. I don't have to do any of that mess, right? And I'm cutting the water use a third. If I go to the powered humidifier, it's got a squirrel cage in it instead of a big old propeller. That thing is 48 decibels. A variable speed, pick one, or 55 decibels. So our old one was 70. So, there's still brands out there that use a big old fan. Those things are pretty loud. They're louder than your furnace. That one's not. Cuts the water use in half, and I don't have to take it apart to change the pad. It pulls right out of the front like a media filter, slides right back in place, and you're off to your next job. Now on the bypass here, if my duct is facing the wrong way, I don't have to completely rebuild this thing. I literally lift that one section out of the middle, and in 4 steps, I've flipped it around in seconds. So easier for you to move on to finishing that job. And another deal where I'm lower than 50 decibels on my humidifier there. So awesome pieces of gear. They all ship with a digital humidistat with an outdoor sensor that'll give you dew point control. If you're using a thermostat to do your humidification, turning it on and off, don't throw that away. Save it for another job. And in the summertime, you can go into the installer setup and tell it that it's controlling a dehumidifier. We got both software built in there, so it can run a dehumidifier if you're not running a humidifier. So nice piece of gear that pretty much comes free with the unit. So we got basic bypass, right? 17 and 12 gallon a day models. We've got advanced 17 and 12 gallon models, and we got a good powered humidifier that's 18 gallons that cuts that water use in half. So pretty nice piece of gear for your evaporatives. Now, when you're putting in humidifiers, you got to be careful. Every brand out there has a spec page, and just about all of them are about the same. If I put in my bypass humidifier, either one of them, I can't have a static pressure greater than 0.3 inches of water column on my plenum. If it's a powered, I can't have more than 0.4 static on my plenum. If so, it'll blow water off the pad, right? So, and this is another brand here that I pulled out of their install manual, 0.4, same thing, right? So check your plenum pressure. Make sure that you are not over exceeding those limits, okay? If you are, you got to go back to the fan motor, find out why that system has so much pressure on it. You may have to make some duct adjustments, okay? So make sure you don't overlook that. And then an electrode humidifier. That's our new one that you take the canister out once a year. Once it gets filled up, sometimes it lasts more than a year. But if you're on a regular routine maintenance with an end user, I would change that out once a year. And this thing is the ultimate. Doesn't need the heat to be on to give you 11 gallons or 22 gallons a day, depending on the voltage you put to it. Okay. Now be careful when you quote these, because you got to run a dedicated line to it. It pulls 12 amps whether it's 110 volt or 220. So I would never make this 110 volt. If I had to pull a wire, I'm going to run a number 14, 15 amp circuit over there, number 14 wire, 15 amp breaker, and that sucker is going to give me 22 gallons a day. So it totally rocks, okay? Super easy. The tank, it fills up with water, and then it starts adding the electricity in there, and it starts evaporating that water out of that tank, okay? And all the stuff gets caught in there. Now, we pre-salt these tanks, so if you've got a water softener you're hooking it to, that's fine. It's going to start conducting right away about 15 minutes after you turn it on. You never want to put reverse osmosis water in this machine. It needs dirty water to work, because the dirty water means, and when I say dirty, what I mean is water with mineral content in it, okay? Calcium, magnesium conducts the electricity, really likes that. So you can do it on the water softener fine. If you don't think if it's on an RO, you got to take it and pipe it on the dirty side of that RO over to this machine, okay? Pretty easy. Now, something that we have a patent on with our partner Nortec, who makes these for us, is that even if it was almost all the way full and about to shut down, it's still going to give me 22 gallons a day output. Our competitors start going down in output as they fill up. That's a Nortec patent, and we get to realize it as their partner. It also, that auto adaptive cycle where it's bringing in a little clean water and letting a little dirty water go. It's maintaining a balance in there that gives you some extended life of that tank as well. So cool. Now we're into ventilation. We're moving right along, right? So if your house isn't ventilated, you got problems. So here's how houses typically run. Exhaust ventilation. Nobody ever did a thing, right? So if your house was built in 1930, hey man, your electric bills are high, but your kids aren't sick, right? Because you can feel the air blow through it. But you move into some of these newer neighborhoods over the past 20 years, it might not be the tightest house in the world, but it has no ventilation. And I got a furnace and water heater sucking air out of the house. I got a fireplace sucking air out of the house. I've got, bath fans sucking air out of the house, and I got no makeup air, right? So that could cause a negative pressure in the house. And it doesn't take much negative pressure to reverse your chimneys. It's actually, the depressurization limit of a house is -5 Pascal. That's not much. That's like 5 sheets of notebook paper worth of weight in your hand. So you don't want exhaust ventilation. At a minimum, you want to bring in some outside air, and there's a couple ways you can do that. Usually you see it's with a 6-inch normally closed damper. You hook it to a Honeywell T10 or a Prestige or a RedLink Vision Pro, Wi-Fi Vision Pro, T6 Wi-Fi, and that sucker will actually open and close that damper, turn the fan on, and bring some fresh air into the structure. At a minimum, you want to keep these houses slightly positive, so it's pushing the humidity, it's pushing the bad stuff out of that structure, and giving you a positive, so your chimneys will never reverse. But the ultimate is an ERV, right? It's also the most expensive and the harder to sell a homeowner, but to me, it's the best indoor air quality I got, right? And I'll tell you why. Because I can balance the fans. I got 2 variable speed fans on either end of it. And if I can bring in a little more than I'm pushing out, I can guarantee that. I'm also not bringing in the bulk of the outside air, whether it's hot or cold. It's actually recovering the energy. Doesn't do it 100%, but the majority of it's getting kept in the house or repelled from coming in. So it's just a way better way of doing it. So a couple things we do to help with ventilation. We make these 110 volt switches that you can replace your light switch for your bath fans, and it'll put them on a timer, and you can actually run the Ashrae code from your exhaust fans. You can add a 6-inch damper with a thermostat, bring in some fresh air, so at least you can keep that house into a positive. Our dehumidifiers have ports on them that you can actually bring in fresh air, dehumidify it before you throw it in the house. Very important for summer because you don't want to add humidity when you're trying to take it out, right? It just doesn't make sense. And then we got the top of the heap, which is our balanced ventilation. So 6-inch damper, if you've never done that, it's really simple. You can put an 8-inch damper in, but these come normally close. You want to order an EARD. Any of our largest, rather the DR90 and the DR120 have ventilation ports already there for you. You just add a motorized damper at the wall. If you want to ventilate and dehumidify, you can run it over to a Vision Pro with an EIM, and you got 3 IAQ devices. That would, if you're hooking up the ventilation and the dehumidifier, that's 2 IAQ devices. So you'll need 2 places to control it, and that's why those Red Link systems with their EIMs are they really the only way to go there. Now when I get into an ERV, this thing has 2 variable speed fans on either side of it. It brings in the fresh air from outside, takes the exhaust air from the house and takes it out. This core is a thermal core that will transfer heat and humidity, right? So it never touches the airstream, so it's all thermodynamic. So heat travels to where it's coldest, right? Just Isaac Newton was awesome. And that's what's keeping that heat recovery from happening inside that machine. No compressors, no anything. All thermal transfer, and awesome, okay? So dehumidifiers, I'm gonna make sure this summer that you might need to add a dehumidifier to that structure to get that's latent built. There's sensible humidity and there's latent humidity. Your air conditioner was built to handle the sensible removal of moisture from your house. If there's excess latent, that's where you start to feel it, right? It's like boiling water. You know, water boils at what, 220 degrees or something like that, Tyler? You're from Purdue, man. You got to know these things. But if it's 250 degrees, it's still boiling, right? It may be boiling a little rapid. So the difference between 220 and 250, that's the latent part of that. So we want to remove that so my air conditioner can focus on cooling and not over focus on dehumidifying. So I may have to add that dehumidifier to get there. So some of the things we're looking for in the house on that is electronics, again, wood floors. And instead of pulling apart, when I got too much humidity, you'll see the floor cup because they got so much moisture, they're pushing against each other and cupping up. It'll ruin a floor, right? So, and also we want to make sure that we keep bacteria and stuff from growing in a house because they grow in moist environments, right? So if you got 70% humidity for the last 3 years in your house and your bedding is the same bedding, it's going to have a lot of fecal matter of dust mites in it. And I know that's gross, but that's what, if you're asthmatic, that's how you start hacking. So they sell a lot of hypoallergenic pillow covers, blah, 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 blah. Great, if you don't keep your house dehumidified, you're going to have them anyway. So it's not just for structure, it's for health, okay? All right, so we looked at a couple of products. Now, let me ask you this. When you get into the house, how do you bring it up to the homeowner? Because some of you are really good at that, right? Some of you have some good skills, know how to go in there and say, Mr. Johnson, you got to have this UV light. And he believes you, right? And then you got the others that don't believe you. Or it's just, it's just hard for you to talk to them. So I set that on the counter. I go do my job. Hey, Gary Crosby with Resideo. We're here to do your clean and check. We're giving you a free health house report card today. I just need to set this up in here, and I'm gonna go do your clean and check or whatever. When you come back, you're gonna have a report of everything that's going on in that house that you're able to share with a homeowner in 30 minutes. So if you're a service technician that's got a tablet, it will email straight to your tablet. You got your job done. Now you can go, after you get your ticket filled out, you can say, okay, well, let's look at your indoor air quality. Now, indoor air quality is a real issue, right? I mean, everybody on this call probably has something at their house they wish they could fix, right? Well, homeowners are the same way, and they'll go and they'll buy stuff. They'll buy, 15 different little standalone air cleaners that cost them more than what you could have done for them. So how do we measure it? And why do homeowners say, yeah, no, not interested? It's because our delivery as technicians, and I'm guilty, has been kind of horrible, right? It's like, hey, we've got a flyer out this month, or this, that, and the other, but that's not how you test equipment. That's not how you treat the heating system. You take your fluke meter out. You got these, I've seen gauges now, man, they're crazy. I couldn't even use them. They're digital and crap coming all out over the place. But that's what you use to fine tune that system. You need a tool that helps you gather the information of what's in the air and show the homeowner what's going on, okay? And we stop guessing doing that. We're actually proving it, because your home is really just a giant filter for dust, dander, pollen, odors, smoke, molds, all that stuff. And when that stuff gets out of control, the only trade that can really help get that house back into control is the HVAC contractor, not the plumber, not the electrician, you guys, right? So let's look at what we want to do is get the data from the house so we can turn it into something that the homeowner can digest, understand, and say yes or no, I want that fixed today, okay? So we put this in, and what this is going to do is allow you to go in, say I'm here to do the job, and then go over their monitor finding. And then we also provide you with, if the particulates were the thing that was the problem, it's going to give you filter suggestions on the product page. If it said that my chemicals were really off the charts in there, then it's going to give you the UV light as the first option, or some ventilation. So it actually takes the guesswork out of your head and puts it in front of the homeowner as to here's what's going on. So let's look at these are the six items we measure: temperature, relative humidity, carbon monoxide, particulates, chemicals and odors, and carbon dioxide. Those are the big things that we're trying to knock out in the house and keep in control, okay? So hopefully you can zoom in on this page and not on me. But the first thing that the report spits out is it's going to start from the top to the bottom of those six things, and it's going to line up. The first thing it comes to on this page here, it's going to tell you here's your monitor and when we ran the report. Then it's going to say, it's going to line up the good stuff first that came out on the report good, and the very bottom is the worst thing that's going on in the house, okay? There's a reason we do that. We want to show them what's good first, then we're going to drill down on what needs attention. Then when you get down to the end of the report, that's where it's going to start showing you what needed attention in a bad way. And it's going to be the first thing on the product report that says, the last thing you showed them here will be the first thing they need to do to fix the problem, okay? So this is an example of what the carbon monoxide gauge looks like. This looks like a gas gauge, right? Something easy to understand for the homeowner. If it gets outside of this the 0.4 parts per million is the allowable parts per million that a structure can have. You can see they have none in that house. If it was up here, we would have to do something about it, right? And you should be doing that on that call, right? Especially when we're talking about carbon monoxide. So this puts proof in the homeowner's face. And they're gonna, here's a scenario. Well, your carbon monoxide levels are a little high. Yeah, I think we can live with that. You're probably not gonna have that conversation. They're gonna be wanting to know what they do to fix that, okay? And then we go to what's next on the report. Well, here's carbon dioxide. The acceptable range is 750 parts per million. They're slightly outside of the control, okay? Little ventilation, probably take care of that. Little UV, probably with PCO, could bring that back into control, okay? And what I mean by that is, well, my fan isn't running right now. My UV and my PCO, let's say they don't even have one, right? So that's where you'd have to say, well, we're going to add a UV and PCO, but you're going to have to run this fan a little more, because if the fan's not running, we can't be pulling. That's what's helping us achieve those goals. I get down here to odors and smells. You can see that, then that's the VOCs. Now we try to simplify the terminology for you and the homeowner there, instead of saying, hey man, you got a lot of chemicals in here. No, odors and smells. In here in this little synopsis gives them a little homeowner-friendly reason what that means, okay? Now, we got to pull that back into control, and that's a really telltale sign of ventilation needed in this structure, okay? And here's the particles. You can see the particulates are way out of control. You know, if you ran a report and the fan wasn't running and they got a good filter, you're liable to see that. And then you could turn the fan on for about an hour or so, and then you'll start seeing that go down. So that's how we pull things back into control and educate them on, you may be quoting a filter system, a UV light, and a brand new piece of equipment because it's 18 years old. We want to push them to the variable speed. Your ticket price is going to be higher, but that's not why we're doing it. We're doing it because it's going to clean the air better. Now your boss is going to look at it and say, holy crap, Billy's average ticket price is $8,800 now. That's great, but the end user wins to get there, okay? So this is what we care about here. The carbon monoxide was good. The carbon dioxide was good. All that stuff here. If you look at, let's say that the whole report was fine. Great. Make sure you tell the homeowner, hey, your house is great. We've been keeping this house clean for the last 3 years. Look at your report card here. You're going to find houses that are fine. Make sure you equally tell them how great that is, because that makes you look better. That bonds you with that homeowner like you wouldn't believe. But if you have something that you need to pay attention to, that report's going to tell you. And then it's going to line up your product sell sheets. And it's going to say, and it's going to do it by, it's going to start with the one you need to address first for that homeowner, okay? And it's going to give you bullet points to talk about right there in your face, and then you can price it. So it goes through all the humidifiers. If you need a better thermostat like the Prestige that can run a humidifier, dehumidifier, ventilator at the same time, you might need to upgrade their thermostat, because it's not just these products, it's what's turning them on and off, turning the fan on and off, and those higher end stats have more ability to do that stuff, okay? Ventilation, odors and smells, these are the products that we sell that you saw a little bit of, and it's going to tell you which one to go do it, okay? And it's going to solve the problem for them. So these things have a cost, right? Everybody goes, well, how much is that machine, Gary? Look, this thing is like $2,000, okay? One time, $2,000. Once a year, you pay $1,000 for a cell service, and you send it in to get recalibrated, okay? So let's say it cost me $2,000, but my technician sells an extra $20,000 off his truck. It should pay for itself, okay? There's a little bit of investment, but that's what tools cost money. But you get the machine, we put you through a training course so you can learn how to use those reports and be a professional to that homeowner, give the correct prescription to the diagnosis. Prescription before diagnosis is malpractice. Diagnosis after prescription, or excuse me, did I say that wrong? Prescription before diagnosis is malpractice. You want to give a diagnostic test and find out what's going on before you start prescribing anything. This is what this tool allows you to do, okay, and prove it. So we got some different reports that you'll get from a manager level or from a technician level. But I tell you, it's a good way to stop guessing and actually get some good reporting out of this. So that's enough of my yakking. What do you got?
All right, we got a couple questions for you. We got Nathan. He's going back a little bit. He's asking, is there a Merv 11 or greater option from Resideo that is a 1-inch or 2-inch option for filters?
So we don't have, to get a higher Merv, you got to have some surface area. So it's hard to cram that 1-inch filter. We do make a 3-inch media filter, but it's a lay-in 1-inch. I grew up in Tennessee. There's a lot of 20 by 30 return air grills and stuff. We make a filter grill 4-inch. It's actually like 2.5 inches. That's a Merv 11, but not for a media cabinet. So all of our medias are going to be 4 inches to give you those higher Mervs. So good question, by the way.
Another question Nathan had was, any filtration options for RTUs?
So rooftop units, I guess that's what he's talking about. So, you know, again, if your rooftop unit has those 2-inch filters that usually slide in up, you get up there and do it that way. The only way you're going to get a good 4-inch filter for a rooftop unit is if they've got return ceiling diffusers. You can change those out to a filter diffuser, and we make these 20 by 20 4-inch filters that fit in that 1-inch diffuser. So you'd actually have to move your filter change from the unit down to the space, but otherwise we don't make anything other than the 2-inch filter that goes in there, and that's usually a commercial filter. Everything we got is pretty much for a house. So unless you're doing it the way I just said, which is convert them to the ceiling diffuser grill. What else you got?
Richard had a question going back to the ventilation. So does the 6-inch damper feed directly into the return side?
Yes, you want to take, so Richard asked, if I use a 6-inch damper to bring some fresh air in, you want to bring it on the outside of the house. It's got to be above snow drift, obviously, right? You want a good bird screen. Usually you get those 6-inch vents that, you know, any supply house usually has some. You want to make sure that if it's got a flapper that you rip the flap out, because otherwise it'll suck shut when you turn the vent on. And it's got a good bird screen so nothing can come up there and live. And then go straight into the return. Now, if you can, try to mix it a little farther down the return from the furnace so it's got time to mix with whatever temperature of the air is coming in from outside with the hotter indoor air. You don't want to just shove, you know, -2 degree air into the return, right? Because if you pull your, you know, you don't want to ever get that delta T on that furnace out of whack, because it'll rust your heat exchangers. Same thing in the summer. You want to try to mix it with the air before it comes in. But great question, and also on our our thermostats that do ventilation that are Wi-Fi or RedLink, we have temperature and humidity lockouts, because those systems don't do any recovery. They're just bringing in raw air from outside. Well, when it's raining, you might want to stop the ventilation till it stops raining. And those will give you some fine tuning on those to do that. So great questions. We got anything else?
Yeah. So Nathan was going back to his prior question about the rooftop units and stuff. Do you make that grill? Was his question.
We don't make the grill, but we make the filter. So if you just get a 20 by, let's say that your ceiling diffusers are 20 by 20, your ceiling grills, just go get a Hart and Cooley. I mean, I'm just saying that because I know them off the top of my head. Return air filter grill. It's not a stamp face. It's actually got a little piece that goes in and then has latches and it swings down and a 1-inch filter slides in there. Well, these 4-inch filters we make Well, they're actually like 2.5, almost 3, but they have a 1-inch lip and then they go up 3 inches, so they fit in there. You just got to have a good 8-inch space on the back side of that filter grill, and you can convert all those. Very simple. If you want to know, if you want some data on that, email Tyler. Tell him you want some product information, and I'll email it to him. Okay.
Sounds
Anything
good.
else?
Yep. Orville asks, so what exactly does the particulates measure for your unit? Is it mold, pet dander, dust?
It's really not measuring mold stuff. It's just there's something floating in the air, and it's picking it up, right? So it knows that, you know, whatever's in your dust. Now, it doesn't spectrum analyze to tell you what the dust is. There are some $1,000 machines that do that. It's just telling you that your house is dusty, and if you turn your fan on, and you got a good filter system, and you retest with this, you'll see the decrease. I mean, you can test out with this thing. You know, we did a really bad house that was spray foamed. They really needed an ERV, but they didn't want to spend the money on it. So we put the PCO in there with the UV with the PCO, let it run 24 hours with the fan cranking, and it was about a 60% reduction in VOC. So these things do a really good job, and we proved it with this machine, right? We did a before and after on the thing. So what else you got?
We have a question from Joseph. He says, do I want to mount a power fan humidifier on the supply duct or the return?
So on a powered humidifier, because it doesn't have a bypass coming in, it's actually pulling the air out of that supply, running it through some side vents and back through. The pan pulls it back through. So it really needs a 120-degree plenum temperature system to operate properly. If you put one on the return side, because that's the only place it'll go, it's only going to give you 70-degree air through that at all times. So you're going to cut the output in half if you do that. But if you force the fan on with a call for humidity, even though it's 70-degree air, it's going to run pretty much all winter long, all day long, but it will get there. It will actually give you the humidity. It just takes longer to get there. But avoid it if you can. A steam would be a better option because you can put a 2-inch hole in it, and if it's a downflow, you can get a 15-foot hose kit and convert that thing to a downflow and inject that in there and give you some proper humidity in that space. So yeah, evaporatives have to steal from the system, so plenum temperature is king with those evaporatives. What you got? Is that it?
Just everyone saying thank you.
Thank every one of you for sticking with me here. I hope this helps you. If you got any questions, you know how to get a hold of me here at Jackson.